My name's Majewski, as I said before. I'm with USDA Extension, and I work with our state's dairy and livestock, and I work in more forage, crop and forage production, kind of the feed end of things. And I was going to talk a little bit about forage quality. So let me just ask you. Someone define forage quality. So if I say, what's forage quality, what comes to mind? Shut up. Okay, nutritional value.
Yeast like water and yeast for making the nutritional value.
Okay. It's not nutrition.
Yeah, we think water is.
Okay. So nutrition is, and that's pretty common, that people will say, energy content, or they'll say crude protein or minerals or something like that, or all of those things. And that's certainly an important part. But if we're defining forage quality, it's the ability of any forage to support a given level of animal production. It's that simple. So like everything that anyone ever has, right? So, but it does. So it kind of depends. Forage quality depends on the animal that you're feeding. What is supporting a buffalo during the winter when they've got really low nutritional needs, when they're going through that sort of, where they're almost at like maintenance, is going to be very different than that cow when she's calving and nursing her calf, right? So what's good quality during the winter is not good quality during the spring. Okay? It depends on the animal, depends on the need, it depends on that nutritional demand. One of the biggest factors that affects forage quality is actually going to be the stage of maturity. Okay, so look at this grass here. This is orchard grass. In Timothy. So look at this stuff here. This is also orchard grass in Timothy, right here. For a cow that just calves and is nursing that calf, which is the better quality? The stuff. And why do you think that is? What about it? Right. So plants start out in the spring, or with regrowth, it's in what we call vegetative phases. So you've got all this lush, leafy growth. Okay, leaves are soft, they're pliable, and they're full of all the goodies. So there's plenty of protein, there's lots of starches and sugars, a high proportion of minerals in them. So there's a lot of good stuff. And what's more is that this material is highly digestible. So not only is there a lot of stuff that's in the feed, but they can digest it and they can extract that nutrition from it. Now as plants mature, they start to build up fiber, okay? And it's a way of providing physical support. You can see that, this stem is, some 3 feet tall or something like that, and it's supporting this relatively heavy seed bed on it. Some physical support in order to keep that stem up straight and from not breaking down, so that you can pollinate and that's mature. In order to do that, those plants will build up plant fiber. Okay, so those cell walls in the individual cells will start accumulating cellulose. They'll start accumulating materials like lignin. Those are pretty rigid compounds, and they do a good job of supporting, but they're not very digestible. Okay? So what happens, now ruminant animals like buffalo, like cattle, like sheep, they can get nutrition out of it. So they've got those rumens that are populated by billions and billions of bacteria and protozoans and so on that will ferment that fiber, gradually break it down, and so that they can get some nutrition from it. That's one of the advantages that ruminants have on grasslands. But it takes a while to do that, for that fiber to break down. And the more fiber that's in it, the longer it needs to stay in that animal's rumen in order to break down. While it's getting broken down, until it's digested, it's taking up space. So it's almost kind of a double whammy. Okay? So with material like this, an animal that's grazing on this, it is going to break down relatively quickly, and it's got a lot of high proportion of the protein and the energy in that's providing nutrition. Something like that, it's got a higher proportion of fiber. So it doesn't have as much nutrients to begin with, and what it does is going to take up a lot of space and limit that animal's intake. So if you're feeding your animal something like this, it's going to fill it up quickly. It's going to stay full for a longer period of time, so it's not going to be able to consume as much feed, and that feed that it consumes doesn't have the nutritional things to support a high level of production. So any kind of like rapid growth, or the good growth that we're looking for with young stock, or support lactation, or putting on that weight at the end of the season to see it through the winter. Does that make sense? Yeah. Any questions so far? So, when it comes to managing forage quality, some of the things that we can do is like kind of maintain our pastures so that we've got more of this vegetative growth rather than letting it get mature. Earlier when we were talking, before the whole group came here and we were talking about mixed use, some farms here will use a combination of mechanical harvesting and grazing. Because first thing in spring, starting right around late April, you get those warm spells, and by mid-May the grass is growing gangbusters. And it's usually growing faster than we can keep up with it. So, rather than let stuff that's at this stage get all the way to this stage before we do anything with it, farms will graze a portion of their land, let the animals keep up with the grass that way, and maybe on half of their total area, and they'll mechanically harvest the rest. Then, around this time of the year, when we start getting hotter and drier weather, and the grass is growing more slowly and you need a longer rest period before you can turn your animals back out onto it, then you need to have more land in the rotation. So maybe you'll be opening up some of that land that you mechanically harvested, and then you can have that available for grazing later on. I'm seeing some nodding heads. Are there farms that are doing that, or
we practice that.
Okay. How easily does that work for? I mean, is it something that works well for you? Is it something you find challenging?
No, it's not challenging at all. We just manage
If you have plenty of land.
Right. Okay.
If you don't have plenty of land, you chill. I mean, you won't keep up with all of this, so we'll cut it off.
Right.
We'll raise our decks and take the tops off. That's how we do it.
Okay.
It gets ahead of us. That's what we do.
Well, do your animals graze? I mean, how many acres do you have that are fenced that they can move into? You have all the
So we fence when we start a farm or get another farm, we fence the entire thing.
right.
And then we'll go in, as we said, we'll mechanically harvest parts of it. But the entire perimeter is around the perimeter.
So, but you let them then graze the whole thing?
No, we break it up. We have
that's
paddocks. So we'll do 14 acres or 20 acre paddocks, and then we'll move them every 3 years. But we also use different types of animals. So our bisons will be the first ones on a piece of land, and then we'll move them out. We'll move the bovines behind them.
Oh, so you're mixing?
Yeah. It's just what we found to work for us. It may not be for everybody else. But anything gets ahead of you, then you go in mechanically and we cut it. We'll
Do
just
you
take
mix
it down.
do you mix the breeds, or do you keep them separate?
No, we keep them separate. Yeah. We're really a genetic, operation. So we're into high genetics. Well, like Japanese Wagyu is one of our breeds. So we're very, very interested in genetics. Whether it's Bison or Yankee.
Is there ever a time that you want the grass to go to seed, that you want to let it go to seed?
I would say no. From a nutritional standpoint,
It doesn't reseed the pasture. It doesn't reseed the pasture.
I mean, technically yes, but number one, a well-maintained grassland shouldn't need periodic reseeding. Um, with proper grazing management, soil testing, liming the soil or amending the soil to keep the nutrient levels up, keep the fertility up. Grass doesn't need a whole lot, and it doesn't peter out the same way that others do. So we don't really need to periodically reseed pastures or hayfields as a regular management practice. Sometimes things happen, like you've got a disastrous year of, floods or really, really bad droughts, and you get weed infestations, and maybe then you need to take some sort of action. But if everything is going reasonably well, or even if things aren't going quite as well as you'd like to every year, grasslands can take that. And adding to that, letting, whatever sort of seed is just kind of rattling around from here is going to be a really inefficient way of reseeding the field. If you think about it, grass seeds are pretty fluffy. At the beginning, if you've ever opened up a bag of grass seed, it's just really fluffy. So it's not going to make its way to the soil surface very readily. And then once it's there, even if it did get into the soil, even if it did manage to germinate, you've got this little tiny grass seedling that's competing with all of these grass plants around that have got fully developed root systems that are shading the soil underneath it, that are taking up all the nutrients and water. They're kind of hogging the area to themselves. So broadcasting seed just on a surface like this, just give me the money instead. Period. You might want to save your higher quality hay, so maybe a good second cutting hay that's softer, leafier, and a little bit greener. Save that for the end of the thing, as you're starting to get into spring, when when those cows are in late gestation, and then their needs start ramping up as that calf is growing and they're getting ready for calving and lactation. So, in order to know what the best is, what's the top drawer stuff and what's the stuff that you can feed early in the winter, lab analysis is really the best way to go. If I have like a 2 bales of hay, a nice second cutting grass hay, and then a late first cutting weedy hay, it's easy to tell a lot of things. You can say, all right, this is a lot more mature, this is a lot more leafy. This has got weeds in there that aren't as nutritionally valuable as all the grasses in here. There's a lot that you can tell. And yet, you can't tell everything. Okay, you can't say exactly. It's really difficult to say exactly what the true protein content is of even that really good hay. You can say, I'll bet you it's somewhere between 12 to 15, but that's a considerable range. And you probably want to dial that in a little bit more just to know what you're dealing with. And that's where lab analysis comes in. Just to walk you through, so on that last page, a lot of feed analysis is driven by dairy or commercial livestock operations, where they're really kind of tweaking things really closely. And so you've got a lot of components in here that may not be especially relevant to you, okay? Things like adjusted acid detergent, crude protein, or soluble protein, or, in vitro true digestibility at 30 hours. Those are all things that dairy farms are using in their rations, things that you're probably not all that interested in, that you're going to use all that much, although if I'm wrong. I highlighted what I would think at a quick glance are the most useful things that could give you a quick idea of what the quality of your forage is and how to make some good decisions on how to feed it. So dry matter and moisture is one thing. we always feed or we calculate rations on a dry matter basis. Even dry hay, even hay that you put your hand in there and it just feels good and dry and crunchy, is not totally dry. It's got a certain amount of moisture in it. It may only be, less than 10%, maybe a lot less than 10%, but there's some moisture in there that you'd want to factor in. Acid detergent fiber, that's the way that just refers to the way that we measure fiber. The way that we now analyze feed for fiber is you take a sample and you boil it for an hour in a neutral detergent, actually, like dish soap. And then you filter that off, and then you take that residue and then you boil it again for an hour in an acid detergent. And then some of that soluble, digestible fiber will be dissolved away, and then that residue is your acid detergent fiber. And that's the figure that we look at to see how mature it is, how much it's going to have. It's a measure of that indigestible fiber in there. Crude protein is another one that you can use. Again, most of the grass hay in this region is even on the low end, needs, it's averaging from on low end of like 7% to a high end of like 15% for grasses. If you've got alfalfa or clovers in there, or if it's predominantly alfalfa or clover, then it's going to be higher, be more like 18 and maybe push to 20%. And then TDN, that stands for total digestible nutrients. That's an estimate of energy in there. So for a very simple ration, you can check the amount of energy, you can check the amount of protein, and based on that you can say this is something that I can feed out, this is something that I feed, but I might need to supplement just a little bit of concentrate in there for those high nutritional needs, or I'm good to go.
Would you say that's like the key metric to look at?
I think so. It's all important, but if I were taking a quick glance at it, TDN and crude protein and fiber would be the things that I would look at. Fiber to see like how much you're going to be able to get out of it. Crude protein, because that's one of the nutrients that we're factoring in when we're coming up with feed rations. And then TDN is the other component. So that's between that you've got your protein, you've got your energy. So that's 90% of it right there.
Okay, so are you better off, I'm on
So it depends on, there I am again, right? So it depends on at the same stage of maturity, okay? So if I had first cutting grass that looked like this, and I were to mow it, or just let it get a little bit taller, say everything was just, tall and leafy like this, and I were to mow it in, say, the late stage of May, that would be higher quality than grass that looked exactly like this that I took as a second cutting. And that's because grass that's exposed to like more heat and more humidity, you get a little bit more lignin. Lignin is the other component of indigestible fiber. Lignin is what wood chips are basically made of. So, it's technically going to be more digestible, more nutritious with first cutting, but that's only if it's at the stage of growth. If it looks like that really soft, leafy second, what everyone thinks of as second cutting hay. If it's first cutting hay that's more mature, that you put your hand in it and it feels just more coarse, a little bit more prickly, then it's going to be higher in fiber and not as high a quality as that second cutting. Now, it may still be perfectly adequate for your animal's needs, okay? That might mean that it wouldn't support, a dairy cow that's milking 100 pounds a day. or something, but they've got, insanely high nutritional demands. Other classes of livestock could still do very well on that more mature age. Yes. Yep.
Yeah, you want to know who the heck that is.
Sure.
So I listened to that. Thank you very much.
Sure. Other questions?
I'm not a farmer, but I wonder what you say about the quality of the soil and about supporting that and getting that better.
Soil health is something that's really important. It's something that, fortunately, I think farms and the agricultural community in general have paid more attention to in the last 10, 15 years. Certainly you need to monitor soil fertility periodically, and then amend the soil as needed. So we're always going to be recommending regular soil tests to maintain that. But I think we've got a better recognition that soil fertility is only one part of overall soil health. It also includes the physical condition. It includes the biological component in there. There's, Tabitha, I'm sure you talk to people all the time that people will talk about in a half teaspoon of soil, in a very small bit of soil, there are more microorganisms than there are people on the entire planet. And that all of those little beasties have a really important role as recycling nutrients, keeping soils aggregated and maintaining that soil structure. So it's looking at that really big picture. The nice thing is that perennial grass sod does a really nice job of maintaining soil health all by itself. It's a really healthy thing for soil to be covered with. Because you've got year-round cover. So we talk about the benefits of cover crops, and as important as they are, one of the things that we talk about is the more that you can keep something growing on the soil, the better off it is, and you can't do better than year-round. And it's a really dense, high-quality cover. You've got a really dense root system that's keeping that soil in place. You've got good residue on top that's protecting that soil surface. You've got every year, no matter how aggressively you're grazing or mowing, you've got all this residue and sloughing off roots that are providing fresh residues that are an important food source to those all those microorganisms. So, great pasture. It's just a really healthy thing.
What was that grass you said that was the best cover? Or what was the ground cover was?
So I wasn't talking. It wasn't a
You were just
particular
talking
species.
about-
I was just talking about perennial grasses.
Oh, yeah,
Like
right.
this, as opposed to, if you were doing annual crops like corn, then having a cover crop is a really good thing to do. Here you've kind of got a built-in year-round ground cover to begin with. Okay.
It used to be the hot button topic. A real farmer doesn't need to mow their fields. What's your take on mowing, clipping your pastures?
All right. So, can you tell me more?
So, after multiple grazings,
Yep.
They haven't necessarily trampled down the taller stuff. You've got some of the early dogs that
I think that clipping can be a useful tool, and you can tell him Carl said so. So it's ideally, if you can dial things in perfectly with your paddock size and your rotation, then you can manipulate animal numbers so that you're putting more grazing pressure, so you're kind of making sure that they graze everything down more completely. it's my understanding that with bison not being really domesticated, that might not be as easy as it would be with, say, a flock of sheep. Okay? So in that case, if you're getting uneven grazing, and you're doing the best that you can, I'd say sure, if you have the opportunity to take a look and maybe tighten up your management, then you should do that first.
Okay.
But if you look through things, you've reviewed it, and you've tried different things, and you say, you know what, I think it's really the best that it's going to be, and you're still getting a little bit of uneven grazing, clipping can be useful. And in the case of something like, something like dock, I wouldn't get all that concerned about because it doesn't spread all that much. Although it does, you've got quite a few seeds on that stuff that you see right there. So it does spread by seed. Other weeds, though, that might spread from creeping rootstocks, like milkweed or Canada thistle or smooth bedstraw, or there's a big list of that. If you can clip those and then kind of halt their growth and kind of provide a check on that, I think that's totally valid.
And with weeds, they seem to get to a seed head quickly. And my question to follow up on that is, if they're already at a seed head, does it make sense to clip those off? Are we distributing more seeds?
I think if it's like mature seed, then yeah, you might be, aiding and abetting some spread, but at the same time, it's probably going to be spreading on its own anyways. So at the very least, maybe you've kept it by knocking it down to the ground. You're keeping it in one place rather than letting it blow off somewhere. The other thing is that if you can clip before those seeds come to maturity, that's going to be a more effective, management tool.
I mean, we do it just to share with everybody. We do it for multiple reasons. We're going to clip it before it goes to seed. We're going to manage the weed, and the weed is your worst enemy. So you've got to manage that, and also when you take those tops off, the loud sunlight and other things, the lower stuff that you're pertaining to grows up better. So it's no different than a forest. If you take that canopy out, the rest of the forest grows better. So take those things off at foot high.
I think they go back with a vengeance, though, and they go back more quickly.
Well, the burdock does.
There's other ways, a lot of farmers don't want to manage it with broadleaf spray, but that's really, you've got to get rid of the weeds. Or you're never going to win that battle.
And what about like knapweed that spreads through the roots? There's these weevils that they have out west. I talked to my person at the office about having some brought in, and they were totally against the idea, but it was hard to control.
Right.
knapweed.
And so where's your office, or where
In New York?
Oh, it's in New York. So I had someone asking about brown knapweed, so a closely related species, and there has been work done with weevils. The thing is that around here it's not an effective management practice in the Northeast because it's a different environment, and it seems that you can't release them and then let them build up a population. And the thing about biological control like that is that sometimes vegetable producers will release ladybugs or something, and ladybugs will go after aphids or leading, and they'll do a great job of polishing off all the insect pests, and then that's that. Biological control of weeds works a little bit differently. You're not going to be able to just kind of dump out a box of weevils and then a month later the pasture is going to be clear, or even a year later. It's more that you release them, they'll feed on it, and they'll gradually weaken that stand of weeds. And then maybe over the course of like 10 years, they'll reduce the density of that weed in some areas, and make it, put a little bit of a check on it, rather than it being a sort of eradication tool.
Sure, I hear you. So what's the suggestion for knacking, spotted knacking?
I think, that might be one of those occasions where, where a herbicide is warranted. When I talk to people about managing weeds, I actually, herbicides is not the first thing that I mentioned, despite it being the first thing that I just mentioned right now. But a lot of times, as I said before, it might be that the weeds are an indication that there's an opportunity to improve your management. So test your soil if it's been a few years, and if the fertility is low, put some lime or some fertilizer out there, because that'll provide the fertility, that'll support more vigorous grass growth, that will make that grass more competitive. Or either, your harvesting or your grazing management. If you've done all of those things, then maybe, a herbicide is the way to go. But if it's the first thing that you look at, and there's all these other things that you need to address, then I can guarantee that you can apply that herbicide, it'll get rid of the weeds, and then in 2 years you'll be right back where you started. What else?
The nutrition value, and that's to support the grazing animals. What we're looking at down here, Timothy and orchard grass, with fescue. Should you be planting any of that, or should you be relying on what naturally grows in your specific region?
I would say when I talk to people about seeding recommendations, I would say, number one, it depends on what your soils are, and then what your use is. Certain grasses are better adapted to droughty conditions, so orchard grass tends to have a certain amount of drought tolerance. Timothy likes to have more moist conditions. As far as use goes, Timothy is great for mechanically harvesting. It matures a little bit later in the year. It's popular for hay production, but it's kind of a wimpy grass that it'll, grow, and then you take your first cutting, and then that second cutting is like really slow compared to other grass species, like orchard grass. Orchard grass, without getting into the really nerdy plant biology details, is built a little bit differently, and it just grows back more rapidly. And so it tends to be more productive, but and it's also very tolerant of grazing conditions, which Timothy is not. So I would say if you've got a well-drained soil and it's something that's going to be used primarily as grazing, go with species that are best suited to that. So that might be orchard grass, maybe meadow fescue, maybe some Kentucky bluegrass. The other thing is that you've got variable conditions across any field, and you would recommend putting a mix out there of at least 2 or 3 different grasses plus 1 or 2 legumes in there, so that you've got something that's going to fit into all of those different pitches. If it's something that's going to be strictly mechanically harvested, I might look at, if it's dry hay, sure, go with Timothy or smooth brome. Or reed canary grass is a forage grass that's really productive, high yielding, and is well suited for mechanical harvesting. If it's going to be a mix, well, then go with something that's going to do for either one. Someone keeping track of time? Or I saw the tractor come back, but that was some time ago.
3:23, I don't recall the time we started. I think we had about 40 minutes.
Right, which is the other problem.
Data takes us to the
Okay.
So we're heading to Butterfield, the oldest house in town. It was built pre-country, 1774. And it was actually the original center of town. So the other day we had a local historian that came up and did a walk through the centers of town. If you go straight out here, there's an elementary school. And that was the second center of town, and then the third is obviously the center of town, which is literally like don't blink because you'll miss it. So this is one of many family properties. I think there's 12 or 17 homesteads on and/or a forest property, and they utilize this house. It's like this. So sometimes people are in it, sometimes they're not. Our original Faulkners that we had met with actually were here. They live up in Hanover, which is an hour away. I just love the sound. And I gotta say, the family's been really good about the conservation efforts, recognizing this is such an incredible resource and trying to protect it, and they did it at the right time.
So is this the oldest house?
This is the oldest house. Yep, this is the oldest house. Yeah. They did a tour 2 weeks ago, which I was so bummed because I missed it. Because I was doing my own thing over there.
How thick are the walls?
Oh, probably not very. Two more hayfields are pastured in, but it's sort of needs some love. It's about 2 strands of electric, and if it's even that.
Not buffalo tough yet.
It's not buff tough, no. Although, where would they go? I mean, why would they want to be right in the center of this thing? So we ate this a couple weeks ago. It's coming back pretty nicely, right?
Yeah.
We were able to get 75 bales from this, and that's baleage there, so we don't have to wait for it to dry too much. We can usually cut it one day and bale it next.
Is that how you bail out?
Just because we don't have to. And then we were getting these pop-up showers, so it's like you rake it and then. So I don't know how the weather is for you guys.
The same.
No, yes.
Unpredictable.
Yeah. This is for the Scottish Highlanders, and then our bulls are over in Hillsgrove, so we've got that separated. So, and
Right now you're not grazing anything on this field.
No, this will come back and we'll cut in another couple weeks probably.
Yeah, so here, this was always like the family trout pond. You know, and in the 1950s, I believe, this causeway was put in. This was kind of a meadow and a stream that came up, and this actually meanders up towards the mountain and is the headwaters to the Ashlot. This is one of the largest undeveloped stretches of a watershed, I think, in New England. It's really fantastic. This group, the Trout's Unlimited, got really excited about the trout. They're all about it. But they ended up coming up here, being like, what is this pond? Obviously it was man-made, but there was a huge population of wild trout. And when I say the exciting part was that it's not unusual to find a large population of wild trout, but large wild trout, because usually they only get to a certain size and they either die off or whatever. But these were very established adults, like 14, 15-inch trout, and plenty of them. But basically, because of the causeway was put in the 50s, the way that they did it, they had a riser pipe, and when that water would get in there, it would go out and flush out. But that pipe was starting to fail and needed to be replaced. But the problem is, if it ever did collapse, there's potential of flooding different areas, and so and it also prevents the trout to migrate up naturally. So they basically came up with a design, where they would have natural pools coming up through, and so they could spawn upstream.
Like a trout ladder.
Yeah. And so it was a super fantastic project. There was maybe 10 different, you know, there's USDA, DES, like state, there was bridge people,
They were
there
all
was,
excited.
everybody had to have a stamp, but it was a super fun project. And I've never seen like so many like adults that usually are very strict about stuff actually really enjoy the project. And they also did like certain plantings along the stream bed to, you know, feed a lot of trout, actually feed on vegetation, I guess. And I always like to point out, because I'm very protective of water on the farm, that basically when we came down, I'm sure Keira's telling you all about it.
I tried my very best.
So there's like the hay fields are kind of along the road, but they all have slivers of loafing areas, and I find that's very important for our animals. Where this side hill actually has, you know, managed woodland that come down, and their water source is actually on the back side here for each one of those fields, so you can rotate them through. And there's basically a stone crossing there, and that goes up above to another hay field above here, which we'll turn around in. And so, but you know, they were saying, well, we don't want animals near it, and I was like, well, you know, this is pristine because of all the farm piece. You know, obviously there's a way for them to be destructive, but there's also like a lot of good things too. And so it just has to be managed correctly. And also I was like pointing out, like we had kids helping us, and they're all playing, and I was like, you know, honestly, like this is one of the things that we all kind of fell in love with, a lot of the things that we do, and some of the water, nature, woods, because we're out playing in it, right? We were throwing rocks into like, you know, puddles, and you know, and
There's an app for that now.
yeah. But I mean, so a lot of that stuff's very frowned upon, and so it's a little bit of a reminder, like, you know, do it responsibly, but don't prevent people from falling in love with it. You know, so.
How deep is it in the deepest part?
Yeah, so I would guess probably 16 to 20 feet, depending upon the time of the year. And I was telling the other group, I said the trick, if you were to throw out a line with a bobber on it, like, and you're fishing the top of the water, you're not going to catch any trout. Right now, like with it being like warm, if you put your worm right on the bottom, oh man, you can get some good ones. And it's what a perfect spot for like someone that's learning how to fish. That's gonna catch every tree limb. You know, like, if you can cast it out there, it's hard to miss the water.
No, just up at the farm.
Oh, cool.
Sort of solution where they would do like a 48-inch solid block with two electric strands above and then one wire all fits with this thing. And you can hardly see it. Yeah, I know you can. Yep. And so here, you know, the snowdrifts can get really, really tall, so you have to have a 6-foot fence here. So you can otherwise it can walk right over it.
I mean, I just gotta talk to the group. This is some of the Abenaki group, and we've basically been trying to bring it back up. They came from a farm in Vermont where they were just really leery to work on the head, all the facility, but you know, they would think maybe next month, and you know, 20 years later, like, you know, it's not been done. And so really, yeah, so you'll see some, you know, we have a nice calf crop started here, but some of the, ideally we would actually work and mix up and start sorting out some of the smaller yearlings away from each other, just for competition pieces. And we definitely find that sorting them by their size takes the pecking order away and lets younger ones really do well. Sometimes you'll notice a calf, brand new calf, and a yearling are fighting over mom's milk. The mom can only produce so much, and so that's always a factor.
So the darker, smaller ones actually came to us. They were anywhere from 150 to like 250 pounds. So it was, and we did that because we sort of felt like if we left them with their mom, they probably had a less likely chance of survival. And they've actually come back. I was surpased because a 150-pound calf is a tiny little thing.
Yeah,
So
like
really,
it's
I mean,
tiny,
it's
like a
tiny.
6-month-old. Like, so,
Yeah.
I mean, it was like late. Yeah, so they were.
Yeah, it
they
was
were,
two,
they were
2
pretty.
months old, 2 months old or something. I mean,
So right now we're chasing after getting parasites under control, water. Like right now we have them closed in this section just for you guys, like, and we're doing things differently because of the event, and then haying and other stuff. But you know, like classically, you're gonna be challenged by never having the right, field when you want it. Like,
never having enough pasture.
never having enough pasture. Sorting them out. So you probably could use like 4 groups like this. And one of the benefits of what we do is we have the 3 different locations. So we're running bulls over in our Hillsborough Henniker location. We use our place in Warner for other, like stuff that needs extra attention, or again, that's a hub. But here it has infrastructure to really grow, right? But we have about 25 acres of buffalo pasture that we just threw in on our own last year, and part of it, some of the conversation, questions, and answers, where we do lease, you get $40,000 worth of fence for 20 acres or whatever, so it adds up, but you want to make sure that works. You don't want to have to be tied to any commitments with government and that kind of stuff. So there's balancing it, and so once we say, all right, I can show different people what works, what it looks like. Sometimes the relationships and the communication to like the different programs is really key. When you see that and you say, all right, that is working, very good, it's good for year round. Because snow is definitely a factor. We had one storm, I think last year, 2 years ago, we had 4 feet of snow in one dumping. So, and it stays. And so you take 4 feet in your whole parking lot, and then you pile up, you got something 10 feet tall.
Hey, they have a program for the snow removal, I heard.
We need to talk. We've done other programs in the past, but we are looking to do more.
We kind of overdo it here with we're off in 9 strands. If we just do straight electric, we'll do 9 strands electric.
We have 6 strands in all.
Oh, you have 6
We
strands.
have 8
Okay.
on some, but
Okay.
3 of them are hot.
Okay,
Yeah.
got it.
Yeah.
I see what you're saying. Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
8.
I was gonna say that's a lot of spacing in between.
Yeah, no.
Yeah.
Well, a lot of it is common sense, right? What's on the other side? So actually they've been really good about this. We put 5 there, and they're good. There's some our old beef pasture that still divides off some of this. And that's a great suggestion, and for the most part it works fine. But occasionally you'll have a calf that goes on the other side. Yes. Or the calf's not paying attention, the rest of the herd's on the other, and then it runs through, and they have other ones run through. They don't care if it's electric or not. Like it, they really get some headway. They're just going. So we basically tend to like to do the woven wire outside perimeter, like to kind of prevent calves, no matter what, really aren't springing through, especially along the road. Although it is one of those factors that they're out, the neighbor is indoor forest, so they're probably going to bust back in to get back into where the water and feed is, and through and do some switch gate. You guys come back around, I'll open it back
You
up.
basically run the animals down into this area, and then they'll want to circle. If you chase them, they'll want to circle and go right back out. So you close the gate, and they come to this end gate, and they don't have any place to go. So then they'll circle back,
And then you
to
put
try to
them
get
in.
out this way, and we close this gate, and then they end up in the tub. So, this is...
How many do you put in the tub at the same time?
We try to run really small
Yeah, like
groups
2 or 3.
because they get injured. You know, if you
Yeah,
run
I
bigger
know.
groups, so if you can separate out in like small 3 or 4 animals at a time, it's
Do you
a
have
lot
holding
easier.
pens inside? How many?
Yes.
I'll run you right through there.
Yeah, come on now.
Okay.
Yeah.
Come on.
I think I saw this episode in The Walking Dead.
Yeah. So, yeah. We'll put you right in.
Like there's a door keeping the slide across.
And you can try to push against that.
Yep. So it has to be, I mean, you know, people that have animals understand that piece. But so it's nice, like if you can get one at a time, right? But not always the case.
Wait a minute. You don't have, see, we have this, and we have pens.
Oh.
Here,
Okay, I
where we
see.
separate out.
Yeah.
And
Yeah, so
then,
I did,
then we
yeah.
run them through here. I
Okay.
mean, well,
The more spaces and pens,
the
is
better
fantastic.
it is.
Yeah, although you do, like I have found, you don't want to run like too many too fast, like, or even like you're better off. Don't have it all open. Move one, then move the next.
Yeah.
Very like
If they pick
systematically.
up speed, they can really do some
Yeah,
damage.
because you don't want to give them like a 60-foot runway, and sometimes big handling facilities definitely are problematic. If you're not, you might need 2 or 3 people to run it, which is a problem generally in itself, in my opinion. And so, but yes. And so I'm standing on catwalk over here. That crowd gate will come around. We have the gate. How many people actually been in the handling facility? Well done, well done. All right, so you can poke the ones that haven't.
I think that's me.
So normally we would have the crash cage here, which provides you a little extra time. Not everybody has a crash cage. If you were to come in and put your
Right, Ted?
yes. Yes.
That was nice of you to volunteer like that.
Any
And then they
questions?
just go right out and they go.
Yeah, so sometimes here, one nice thing about this particular one that I like, and not all of them have, is that there is a side release. Yeah. It does have this side where you can open the side door. So if for some reason this was going into a trailer, then you can send this one. Yeah, so then you just have different options. We have different setup with turn the process here, so we have a cleaning area, maybe like set up a trailer or tractor trailer.
Things that you can evaluate just by digging a simple hole. It gets dry pretty quickly, but can everyone see that we kind of have 2 different colors here? We almost have 2 layers in the soil. So we've got this top one, probably I'd say about 7 inches. We see that this is like nice darker brown color, and then we almost get a little lighter, a little yellower here. And so this kind of top part, our darker upper layer is what we call the topsoil, or our A horizon, and that's kind of where, if you are just digging a quick pit to scoop up underground, that's kind of where you want to focus. You can see this is where a lot of the roots are. See a lot of the roots coming out here when we're digging. A lot of the worms and bugs and all that were in this layer. So this is our top layer, our topsoil. That's our most biologically active layer in the soil. So that's where most of the plant roots are going to be, the microbes and all that are going to be. This is where most of our organic matter is, and that's what makes it a darker color, so we don't really get that much organic matter in this soil past 7-8 inches. So we really want to focus on our top brown part. So yeah, as you can see, we've got a pretty nice brown color. That tells us that our organic matter, which is what, you know, feeds the plants and the microbes and all that, that's pretty good. If you've got a light color up here, it could mean a couple things. It could mean maybe if you're on a pretty steep slope with not a ton of vegetation, a lot of your topsoil could have eroded away. It also could just mean that there isn't a lot of organic matter in your topsoil, in which case you might want to start thinking about nutrient or organic matter additions, and all that you can learn just from seeing the color. Then we also talked about roots. As you can see, the roots coming out of here, they're growing pretty straight down. That means that the roots aren't hitting a compacted layer that they're not able to get through. It means the roots are kind of able to utilize this whole layer with that good organic matter. If you dig a hole and you see that the plant roots are growing more horizontal, or maybe they go down a little bit and then horizontal, that means they're probably running into a layer of compaction that they're not able to get through. And there are ways, there are ways to treat and mediate compaction, whether you're using plants, or sometimes you might need to, sometimes tilling can break up the compaction. Then, even just from this top layer, we can also look at our soil structure, which kind of connects to what we were just talking about. And that's how our soil sits in the profile. And so that kind of gives us a good idea almost of how the soil and the plants and the microbes and all that are interacting. So you see here, it stays, you know, I'm holding this big chunk of soil, it's staying pretty well in place, so that means it's got pretty good structure. The roots are helping hold it together. But then if I break off some of it crumbles really nicely. I'm still looking for a good kind of comparison of what this looks like. I think it looks like when you're baking cookies and you've just added the dry ingredients to the wet ingredients, and it's kind of crumbly like that. That's good structure. This is what we want to see from our topsoil, or our first layer of soil. And then I don't know if you can also see, I'll kind of go around, you see these redder areas, these little, we've got these kind of concentrations of, yeah. So we've got our brown color, but then we've got these little, these kind of red concentrations. So that's iron.
Oh, okay.
You guys see the red there? Kind of red contrast. Yeah, it's iron in the soils. So most soils naturally have iron in them. Someone asked in the last group if there are soils without iron, and I don't know for sure. There might be some that just naturally don't have iron, but I haven't seen any that haven't had iron yet. It's in the profile naturally, and what that tells us, what this red tells us, is it tells us where the water's sitting and where our seasonal high, it can tell us where our seasonal high water table is and where our water table generally is sitting, because if you think about, you know, like nails or anything that we see with iron, when it gets wet and then it dries out, it rusts. That's the same thing as what it's doing in the soil. So this tells us that at one point the water table and water was sitting all the way up here in the soil, so it got that iron wet, and then the water's not here anymore, so that iron has oxidized and essentially rusted. And so that can tell us, you know, that can help inform maybe some of our water needs, or even can inform like the timing of different things on our land or a pasture. So if we think, at least here in New England, our wettest time is in the spring. I think that's pretty typical across the country. So if we think in the spring, the water table's sitting just below
our surface here. And so we want to keep that in mind when we're maybe driving equipment over it or having animals out here, because they're gonna, you know, because that water table's right up by the surface. And then on the flip side, if we see these redox features like a couple feet down in the profile, it's telling us that we're pretty well drained, and maybe the soil is a little more susceptible to being a little droughty because the water table doesn't sit higher up in the profile for very long. So even just pulling out this little chunk, we're able to evaluate the structure, we're able to evaluate how well the roots are able to grow into the soil, we're able to kind of get a visual estimate for maybe how much organic matter we have in the soil and if our plants are having nutrients available to them. And so, yeah, we then can talk about soil testing. So if you want maybe more specific answers on what's going on in your soil, that's when a soil test can be kind of helpful. Are there any questions? Move on a little bit.
Is that where you dig down into the water, or is that just where water is flowing through?
So our
You're talking about groundwater that's coming down?
Yeah, so well, that's our observed water table. So if we were to dig a hole and this pit filled with water a little bit, and let's say the water stopped filling at 14 inches down, that's what we call our observed water table. That's where we can expect the water table to be because we see it. These redox features just tell us the furthest extent the water will go. And
So if it were that high, I think what you're asking is if it were up at those redox features, would there be water sitting right there? Is that?
That's what I'm understanding, because
Yeah.
digging down, like in our pastures, our ground, in some areas we dig down starting at a foot, literally there's groundwater. The hole starts to water. Now, not up here where those features, that rust features.
yeah.
That's what I was trying to clarify. What do you mean by water table?
Yeah, so that's, if you were to dig, this is essentially saying if you were to dig in, those redox features tell us if you were to dig in the wettest part of the year, that's where the water table actually would sit, this groundwater table that you're talking about.
So that's an old sign, that rusted feature is...
Yeah, that's evidence that
What
water
happened?
previously has been at that level. And so one thing to keep in mind is soil compaction in the soil can almost trick you with the redox features. In a soil like this, because we didn't hit that layer of compaction, we can infer and be pretty confident that these redox features are indicating our groundwater table. But if you were to dig and in those first couple inches you're having a hard time getting the shovel in, or you see those roots growing along, like horizontally along the profile, and you see a lot of those red rusty features, that could just be because surface water isn't able to penetrate that compacted layer and it's just sitting there. So, you know, you kind of have to be a little bit of a detective and put a couple different pieces together when thinking about the water table, but those features are just a good idea to be aware of how high your water is, and, you know, that could inform when you drive equipment over these areas, or it could inform some different kind of management practices.
I have a quick question, and it's kind of a double-edged sword. We're always told that if we can grow prairie grasses, that it would be, or at least in our fields, it would be advantageous to the animals because the roots go down so much farther than ours do. Or then, yeah. What is the real difference? Can we grow prairie grasses here that will give us deeper roots than say what was here? Or is that a misnomer?
So those native prairie grasses do generally have deeper roots. However, if you have so where we have soils that were glaciated and we have hard pan here, which is like supremely compacted from all the glaciers, almost acts as bedrock. You know, the grasses are not likely going to be able to penetrate through that. So that would restrict, you know, out in the Midwest and Plains states, they don't have that history, and so there's deeper soils out there, so the grasses can grow to their full extent of those roots. So yes, kind of those grasses have the potential to have deeper roots, but out here, if they run into a restrictive layer, it's not like they're still going to have those like 15, 20 foot roots.
If we can, grasses that are native here, so that we have longer grasses lasting longer in our fields. And just a question. To encourage, and you know, better grass.
So that comes down to management and managing for those grasses. I think I mentioned when we were on the panel. Often, so where are you located?
Upstate New York, kind of south of Albany, mid-Hudson Valley.
Yeah.
Glacial area.
Yep.
The glacier went right through our property.
Yep.
It's amazing.
Yeah.
We love the desert. It's all different.
Yeah. Those native grasses are generally warm season grasses. For a while, I had thought that they probably hadn't been up here, but there's some things I'm learning that they may have, in certain cases, been up in and around here, and in your area as well. So those grasses, like I said, they're generally warm season grasses, as opposed to what we have here are cool season grasses. So the temperatures that they prefer are different, and the growing seasons are somewhat different. If you think, I don't know if you've seen like some of the ornamental grasses in landscape planting. Those are different cultivars of many, just slightly different types of many of those prairie grasses.
Are they edible? I mean, can we bring them in the fields for the bison, or is that not good because
those particular ornamental varieties may not be the best because they've been selected for looks. But the similar grasses that were those native grasses, you could. However, it does take a couple of years for them to get established, and then the management on them is different because they have crowns. That's where they store a lot of the energy, and if you graze it too hard, it's gonna kill the plant. And they can take a little bit longer to recover sometimes too. Excuse me. So yes, we can grow them here. I don't think we probably wouldn't want them to be our entire forage base, because that would leave us at a, May in through June without much to graze, maybe even into early July without much to graze, because it hasn't been warm enough to really grow enough to graze it. But there are people that are trying the warm season grasses, and as we're getting warmer. So, that growing season is changing. So, there's growing use cases for it up here as well. And so those do have deeper, more robust root systems. And so I don't think they're necessarily a bad thing to try. They just require different management in order to be successful.
Check. We're at about 4:46, and I know they wanted to wrap up at 5.
Yep. Yep.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any other questions? Because I have stuff to talk about, but happy to also just talk about questions. Answer any questions about.
The soil that has clay in it.
Yeah. So that has its own set of challenges. Where are you located?
We're in Ohio.
Okay. And yeah, I mean, it's New York. Yep.
It's a pond.
Yeah, right.
It's the grass.
Yeah. So are you near like Lake Champlain or no?
West of all.
West of all. How far out?
Ground.
Oh, okay. Okay. So and then where in Ohio?
We are actually in the unglaciated part of Ohio. We're southeast of Columbus.
Okay.
So
Okay.
not quite the middle of the state, but
Yeah. Yeah. No. My wife's from Northwest Ohio, so I know the state pretty. She went to Wright State. I know the area. So yeah. So for clay soils, you're gonna have just have to be mindful in your management around wetter times of the year or after heavy rains. You know, if you may need to remove the animals from the pastures if you've got some really heavy rains, because all they're going to do is pug up the ground, and then wait for it to you know, dry out enough to get back on there. However, with good management, allowing taller residual, so I usually recommend not grazing down lower than like 6, if you can do it, 8 inches with our cool season grasses, and then allowing it to grow a lot taller. You're going to have more root growth, more activity in the soil. That's going to create more pores in the soil for that water to infiltrate and move better through the soil profile. So the more that you can do that, and the more the roots are acting in that top layer of soil, it will break down the compaction. It's in those heavy clay soils, it's really easy to get that surface compaction. And so if you have taller grasses that so the grasses try and have about a 1-to-1 ratio of roots to above ground biomass. So it grows taller, the roots get bigger and deeper down below. You come and graze it off, it sloughs off roots to match, and then it regrows. It just tries to keep that proportional relationship. So the more that you have of that going on, the more it's going to work on that surface compaction that is almost inevitably going to be happening in those heavier clay soils.
But being further south, would they be more amenable to the prairie grasses?
But yeah, potentially. Yeah, I think so. And some of those grasses are more favorable for wetter soils. You can also kind of think about it in terms of timing. In the spring, maybe you have to hold them in just a little bit longer, but you're going to be better off in the this time of year when we're generally across the east region are getting higher rates of evaporation and generally have lower water table. Those sites are going to be more resilient because there is more water around in those heavier soils. Did that get at your yeah. Right. And so, in those cases, you're better off. You really are better off holding the animals in you know, fortified area, whether it's gravel, wood chips, concrete, something like that. As much as you want to get them out, you're much better off holding them in until those conditions get better, so that you can then have good producing pastures for the rest of the season instead of sacrificing that, you know, the whole area for that spring season. You know, because you want to get them out in that spring season. So, yeah, did that address your question enough? Or yeah,
it just frustrates us all.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mother Nature, she's always going to.
Well, you just have to be.
You have to flow with it.
So, with grazing management, we try to, as much as we can, mimic natural systems, and especially, you know, I'm always saying we want to mimic the bison going across the plains. That's really ideally what we want to try and mimic for grasslands, because that's what grasslands like. And so, what that looks like is short duration event, grazing events, that's moderate to high impact, and then longer recovery periods. Around here and down where you are as well, you know, probably get away with that longer recovery period being like 35 to 40 days. In low rainfall environments out on the prairie and rangeland, that could look like 6 months to a year and a half. That proper recovery time. But that having the adequate recovery time is really important for those grasses to regrow, and also not impacting too much is really important. However, if you over impact, you just add more time to the recovery, and you just say, okay, oops, that didn't go as planned. I'm just gonna, you know, next time I'm supposed to go through there with my animals, I'm gonna skip it, and I have to plan accordingly. And so if we do that, that's getting closer to mimicking how those grasslands were interacting with the bison that would kind of naturally go across the plains. And that favors that's what the grasses were, you know, adapted to be accustomed to. And so, you know, generally that shorter duration of impact, if you can get under 3 days of residency time in a particular spot and then move them on, that's where you start to see some real amplification of those benefits, because those grasses after about 3 days start to regrow, and if the animals go back to graze again, if they're still there to be able to go back and graze again, they're going to graze those new shoots because they're nice and tasty.
Yeah, right. And then you wait another.
Yeah, and so that's where you start to really get the amplification of those benefits. And you know, it can be a challenge with bison. In order to do those more rapid moves, having less permanent fencing is important for making it easier. So that might look like a couple strands or a single strand of polywire to try and keep the animals where you want them to be, or tape, or, you know, a single strand of fence line, whatever you want to use with electric fence. But if your animals are not accustomed to that, and you just put your animals out on there and try and use it, it's not going to work. It's a psychological barrier, and you need to train them to it. And so, what that looks like is having them in a place where they can interact with an electric fence, but not go through it. Because sometimes the reaction is to jump forward as opposed to jumping backwards, and if they learn that they can just jump forward and get through it, then that defeats the purpose. So if you do that, then maybe move it a little bit away from the whatever surface, a hard fence or something like that that you're using to discourage them from jumping forwards. Move it out a little bit, put something enticing on the other side of the electric fence. Make sure it's good and strong and well grounded, and get them used to that. And then they can be ready to be managed with the electric fence. You will have animals that it just doesn't work for, and the best thing to do is send them down the road. If you want that, if you want to be able to manage in that way, if you're committed to trying to manage, rotate the animals more frequently and everything like that, you need to be ready to call the animals that aren't cooperating with that system. So that, and a lot of times people look at it as more work, and it certainly can be if you aren't set up for it. One of my failures in advising people a few years ago was I talked to a woman up north. I said, went through the whole thing about, this was with cows, but I, convinced her to start trying to move her animals more frequently. And then I go back up there the next year. Oh, how was it? Oh, it was horrible. I just couldn't make it work. I would reel up the fence as fast as I could and put it back as fast as I could, but they would still just go where I didn't want them to go. So she was just trying to do it. She was just trying to do it with not enough infrastructure, and it was my fault that I didn't even think to explain it, get to that level of explanation. But it's an extreme, but it drives home the point that having proper infrastructure makes all the difference. And so if that looks like, some great perimeter fences with some less permanent interior subdivisions that you can then easily do those, even smaller subdivisions, that makes a huge difference. And fencing is the first part. Once you get that, then you need to figure out how to get them water. And making sure that the water is available to them, because once you start breaking it up, having them in smaller paddocks, you're going to need to make sure that you can get the water to them, or they have access to water somehow. That's something that NRCS can help with, and help get that infrastructure going to really essentially treat the pastures better.
So if you guys want to do that, I'm up for it.
Alright, come on over.
I was wondering if you guys drive around.
So basically what we do is we have a little beach plate that normally we do, and then whatever, but it doesn't really matter because we don't need to judge ages here.
If you're hungry, go up. I just want to say thank you all for coming up here. Welcome to Pitcher Mountain. I'm so happy that you all made the trip up here. So, again, I'm Kaylee. I'm the eldest daughter of the farmers, and this is Ella. She's been chefing away in the kitchen. So you haven't seen her a lot today, but she's done a lot of the food today. So
thank you, Ella.
And we also have Henry, who's our farmhand, and my brother Sam, who's been lugging up all the chairs and the tables and everything. So again, thank you so much for making it happen. Thanks, Henry!
Very very farther from it, you can see it a little on certain days.
I'm enjoying this stuff.
Right.
That's what I usually do.
So you're going south and south and south. So I'm up on the Potomac River. So yeah. There you go. I'm up Potomac.
Yeah, actually.
Oh,